Hi there, my name is Adam. This is my R project. I chose to explore a life expectancy data set with R. I had previously explored this data set in Python a couple years ago, and here's some code that I wrote during that. And in particular, there was one query that I thought was quite interesting, and I wanted to see how quickly I could recreate it in R and at the same time join it with other data and then use R's presentation and plotting and charting and graphing and tabling methods in order to see more visuals for it. This code that I wrote is 800 lines of code. Now, it's a general query engine, so you can do more than just a single query in it, and it also includes a tkinter GUI. But I wanted to start with this because I wanted to show you if I select all these, invert the selection, create a delta query. What I'm doing is selecting all the years of historical data from every country in the world that we have, and I want to output the top, let's say 100 or so rows of data, and it's calculating a delta between one year and the next. What's the biggest changes in life expectancy? And here it goes and it generates this data set. Okay, you say Ukraine, Iceland lost 25, 23, 18, 15, 15 years of life expectancy. And we're going to hold on to this because this is the data set we want to recreate with R. So here is RStudio. You install R and then you can install RStudio. One of the packages that was recommended was to use tidyverse. It includes a bunch of different very common libraries. So it's a package of libraries, and it takes like a couple minutes for it to install all the various pieces of tidyverse. But it gives you some additional functionality beyond base R. It's like using jQuery on top of JavaScript. Okay. So here's the amount of code that it took to recreate that in R. As you can see, it's a really, really small piece of code. This wasn't about generating lots of R code. It was how quickly could I generate it. And so here's the amount of code that does generate that query. And then I do some additional things here, which is create pie charts. I join with other data sources and I create more things. One of the things in R that makes this cool is that built into R is the idea of creating a presentation. They recognize that if you generate this data, you probably want to present it as well. So they have this markup, and inside the markup, it actually literally runs your code and then generates the views inside of it for these various things. It's pretty stinking cool. So this is the markup and this is my presentation. So we're going to knit this thing together and run it, and you're going to see what happens here with this. And so here's the slidey presentation, and we'll click. Here was my project intent. Here's the goals. I want to import that data set. I want to recreate the 1 year delta queries that I did before. I want to join those delta queries with historical information. I'm going to create some charts and visuals. And then I'm doing this presentation native to R in their R markup. So here's the code again that goes ahead and cleans that data and generates that query. Line by line, I can tell you I'm arranging it by the code, which is the country code and year, and then I group it and I filter rows out that don't have any code inside of them. Those would be for continents and regions and stuff like that, so we're ignoring that data. Then we create a data frame, and what we're doing is we're actually renaming some columns here so it's easier to play with. And then I create a new column inside this. A transform allows you to add your data frame with another column. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at this syntax here says get me the next row of information out of this and put it in my data set as the value. So it goes and looks up, if you're in year 1880, it goes and looks and grabs the next year there and grabs the data. and then it also grabs the next life expectancy, and then it makes sure that the filters are consecutive, the years are consecutive, and if they're not, then it gets rid of them. And then finally, it calculates the delta value, which is the difference between those two, and adds that as a column. And then we arrange them by that, and we take the top 100. So there's the syntax for how you do R. And what it results in is this. And as we can see, this looks very much Ukraine, Iceland, 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 Finland, Ukraine, Iceland, 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 Finland. This is the same data set that I created before. Okay, so now we have the data set. What are we going to do with it? Well, why don't we create a pie chart real quick? And what we can quickly see in the top 100 locations around the world, or top 100 events that occurred on a year-over-year basis, Iceland had more of those. It literally had 25% of all the top 100 events that occurred. Sweden at 17% is pretty significant, and France at 11% is pretty significant. Next thing I did was I created historical data from events in world history, and then I joined it with it so that you can see what event occurred, and then I wanted to categorize it by the event type. You can see 1941 was World War II. That year was known as the Ukrainian Holocaust. Iceland had measles outbreaks and flu outbreak and another influenza that wasn't given a name in 1843. 1918, as we'll see, is a particularly big event that occurs here with the Spanish flu and World War I happening at the same time. So then I tried to categorize it by event. Again, you can see it's 2 lines of code to generate this visual. Mostly war and disease are clearly the biggest events in world history that cause these sort of life expectancy changes. And then if you look at it by year, you can see 1918 was the year that had more impact by far. And it was the end of World War I, and it was the beginning of 3 years of the Spanish flu. And finally, you can see that here in this list of the top 100 ordered by year. And again, all I have to do is arrange it by year, and then say, show me the head of the table and give me the top 100. And you can see down here again in 1918 how impactful that was. There's my presentation. Thanks very much.